Welcome in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Welcome to week 3, everybody, as we record here on this Thursday. Getting excited for this weekend's slate of games. Week 3 is interesting in the sense that, we had two very different weeks to start our season. Real low scoring stuff in week 1. And then last week, of course, was kind of gangbusters around the league and everything like that. So now we got to kind of take those 2 weeks of sample and kind of figure out what is real and what is fake. We've got some high ADP type of picks that haven't really panned out yet. So we're going to take a temperature check on our faith in them, kind of turning things around. We're also going to look at, obviously some of the quarterback injury situations and where we might still be able to find some value, whether it's a backup quarterback who is competent, or maybe we get a little bit worried about some of the replacement options that are out there at the quarterback position. And of course, that applies to your fantasy teams as well. Since this will be posted a little bit later on Thursday, we're not going to dig into the Dolphins-Bills game much other than Mario. I think the Bills cover that number.
It's a high enough number. I don't know. The Bills probably won't take the game that seriously, so whatever. I don't care. Bills win by some number of points.
Yes, I think they win by some number of points that is less than 12.5 if I can get it somewhere. But we'll kick things off with the Sunday slate here. We've got the Falcons and the Panthers. The Falcons, I think a lot of people have been pretty impressed by the Falcons defense so far. I mean, I think at once the Vikings offense played into their hands a bit last weekend, but I thought overall some of the moves that the Falcons made and some of the draft picks starting to pan out. I know James Pierce is kind of flashing on a bunch of pass rush metrics so far league wide. So that's looking like a good pick and a good trade up thus far. And the Panthers continue to look like the team that we saw at the beginning of last year and not really at all resembling that team that kind of finished the year hot and maybe gave some false hope to folks out there. So looking at this game, what are your expectations here with the Falcons going up against it? What should be a much easier task facing this Panthers defense?
Yeah, the Falcons haven't been tested that much on defense. Like, in my opinion, the Vikings offense has just been completely non-viable through 2 weeks. And in week 1, the Buccaneers, granted, they still had Cody Mock at the time and Luke Gedeke, but they didn't have Tristan Wirfs. So that was one of those games where it's like, if the Buccaneers were full strength and they had Godwin too, that one might not have looked as good for the Falcons defense. But like you said, this is, even if so, that would be 3 easy matchups in a row in this case. And the Panthers might be about as bad as anyone on offense. Like I think Bryce Young looks just so bad. They don't have to, I guess, go to Dalton, but it's really pointless, this whole Bryce Young thing. So whatever. Tatero McMillan looks good at least. I don't know who else can move the ball in that offense other than, I guess, Chuba Hubbard. But things are so bad with everything else, and the Panthers are so prone to falling behind because their defense is bad too, that I just don't know if I can trust the Panthers to run so many as like 50 plays in most games, because they have no time of possession, or at least they're liable to not have any time of possession against, especially a Falcons team that's prepared to give, as we saw, 15 plus carries to both Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So the Falcons should be able to run out the clock pretty quickly in this one. Against tougher defenses, I'd worry more about this Falcons offense. I still don't think Zach Robinson's calling a good scheme at all. I still think they're pretty much just dependent on giving Bijan Robinson the ball, and when that's not enough, trying to spam it to Drake London. But against the Panthers, that's not a concern. Like the Falcons can be something less than a good offense and still just kind of flatten this Panthers team, because it's just a garbage roster still.
Is this going to be a team that the Falcons that you'd consider kind of loading up on for DFS purposes this weekend too?
Well, if I'm managing the Falcons, I wouldn't want to overwork a guy like Bijan in this game, or London, I guess. He wasn't fully healthy going into last week. So I would see this as a good opportunity to get Tyler Algier throw him a little bit of a bone, while buying some rest for these other guys who you need more when you're going against better defenses. But there's certainly nothing wrong with the matchup for Bijan, any of the pass catchers, Michael Penix, whoever. It's like if the Falcons for some reason want to air it out, they should be able to take pretty much whatever they want. I feel like it might be a little bit more in their nature to get Algier basically another game like last week, but with maybe fewer carries for Bijan, because it just isn't that important to the game.
Yeah, they should have this one, should being the operative word. You can never be too certain with the Falcons, but they should have this one wrapped up, by the time that we're getting into the second half. And therefore, someone like an Algier would certainly make some sense as far as getting some work to. Before we move on over to our next game, we do have a question from our loyal listener, Master. This is a tricky one. You got to pick 3 receivers out of the following 4. And we all, for the record, have them ranked pretty similarly, except for one of these guys. So Cortland Sutton, Devontae Smith, Teteroa McMillan, or Quentin Johnston. We got to lop off one of these players from this quartet.
Sorry, just a second.
The problem for me, I can kind of filibuster here for a second. The problem for me is that Sutton and Smith conventionally would fit in my top 3 here. But at the same time, they have really tough matchups this week. And Johnston does too on the other side, because the Chargers and Broncos are squaring off this week. So it's like, oh man, those are really good secondaries, and therefore really tough matchups. Devontae Smith, of course, it was going to be facing off against the Rams, and the Eagles passing game has really just kind of not gotten off the ground. So I think for sure you're starting T-Mac in this game. I think I saw where there's an important injury potentially in the Falcons secondary. I think Asia Terrell might be a little bit less than 100%, or at least he was earlier this week. So T-Mac, you feel great about, but beyond that, as much as I like the idea of Quentin Johnston bouncing back and being something after a rough couple first years in the league, I think conventionally I'm going with Sutton, Devontae Smith, and McMillan here.
Yeah, I will say I might consider putting Sutton on the bench if McConkey is out for the Chargers, but otherwise, if McConkey's in, I would bench Johnston out of those guys.
Okay, all right, that's fair. And then Krosky, Merritt, or Sutton in a PPR. I don't think that the Eckler injury is really going to goose Krosky Merritt's pass catching work. I think that's going to go largely to McNichols. And I don't know, the Washington setup is weird right now. I don't know exactly what's going on with Jaden Daniels.
It's a tough call. I mean, I think I would go with Krosky Merritt, I think, though, because I think the Daniels situation makes Washington more dependent on the run. And one thing about Washington in the first 2 weeks is that they barely gave running back carries out at all. It's so they're going to have to reformat that offense a little bit, and maybe it won't work, or maybe Kingsbury will fail to make this adjustment, and maybe it'll go wrong for them for that reason. But with Sutton, I'm a little worried that the upside isn't that great for the risk that you're taking on, even though I think he's a really good player. Not sure the Broncos offense is very good. Bo Nix might not be very good. And I think Peyton has shown enough times now that he doesn't really force the ball to any one player. And in Washington's case, I'm just not sure they have much choice but to run the ball more.
Yeah, I think that they're going to need to do that. You can't be exposing Daniels to a ton of hits if he is even playing in this one. Let's move on to our next game. We got the Packers and the Browns. Browns 7.5 point favorites Packers 7.5 point favorites on the road in this spot. Packers obviously really looking like one of the dominant teams in the NFL and the NFC. Generally, thus far, I mean, it was a pretty convincing win both times against the Lions and the Commanders to start their season. The Browns, meanwhile, I think that they are a bad team with fantasy appeal. However, the Packers defense, I think, poses a uniquely difficult setup for these Browns to really thrive offensively this week.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a little tough to tell for sure how good the Packers defense is, and specifically how good their run defense and their coverage personnel might be. they've definitely been really well coached with Hafley. It's possible that Hafley's pretty much in that same tier as like Jesse Minter and Brian Flores as far as defensive coordinators go. And if so, that would go some length of explaining how the Packers have been so good, especially at corner, where like, I'm sorry, I still don't think Keyshawn Nixon is that good. I think he's just been really well coached. And especially when you look at that with the last game against Washington, it's like these plays that Keyshawn Nixon's making on the ball, it's like he almost knows where the ball is going. Like they had the Kingsbury route depths pretty well figured out last week, and those Packers corners were pretty much sitting on it. Like any corner in the NFL can make some of those plays. So I'm not convinced that I'm unconvinced that the Packers corners can't be isolated somehow. But it's like right now in the meantime, Hafley is keeping offenses from figuring out where those points are. Like offenses can't decode it to this point. So the Browns are not the team that's likely to decode that, or even if they could decode it, it's like they might not have the talent to strike whatever points the Packers might be weak. I do think, though, there's a chance that the Packers kind of sleepwalk into this one. And on offense, I'm not sure if you're Matt LaFleur, you're not exactly using your best tricks in this game either. So I could see it being kind of closer than expected, especially because the Packers tend to be pretty run heavy at the moment. And I don't know. Keenshawn Judkins looked pretty good for a player who basically hadn't practiced in like 2 months or whatever. So I think that the Browns offense is fundamentally different with Judkins out there. And at the very least, the Packers might get a little bit more of a test in the run game than they've seen through 2 weeks.
I mean, yeah, I could definitely, yeah, especially compared to.
But Packers win. I just like maybe it's a little bit closer than expected.
Yeah, I think that the Packers sleepwalking detail is definitely in consideration. Here's something that I lifted from our guy Jerry's breakdown article from Monday, just kind of unpacking all of the stats and snaps, routes, things of that nature. And when it comes to the Packers, this completely dovetails with when they brought in Josh Jacobs, but red zone targets are basically not a thing in the Packers offense anymore. They just run it down there. And obviously, like, we already have a convoluted situation with the depth of their wide receiver rotation as it is. It kind of feels like Tucker Kraft is really like the one reliable piece of that passing game that you're going to get week to week. Although with Jaden Reed now being out for this next little bit, what are you kind of keeping your eye on when it comes to this Packers passing game? I think maybe just framing it like between the 20s, because it might be asking a lot for any of these, guys like Matthew Golden or Dobbs or Wicks to see, regular red zone targets here.
Yeah. Even Kraft, I mean, he's mostly been driven by big play per, big yardage per target kind of dynamics. It's not really that he's been targeted that much. He only had 2 catches in week 1. So I definitely expect Kraft to kind of pop up and then disappear again, because I do think LaFleur is always going to, for some reason, be committed to this extremely horizontal distribution of snaps and targets. I hate it. I think you should find your best players and feature them as much as possible before the returns diminish, and LaFleur seems to believe something closer to the opposite. So I don't know who, other than Romeo Dobbs, who's the only pure boundary guy they have, or at least he's like their most proper X receiver that they have on the team. Everybody else is interchangeable to some extent. It's like you're going to see Golden in the slot a lot more than Dobbs, but not as much as Wicks. And when Reed is healthy, he only plays in the slot for some ridiculous reason. So, but Wicks is the guy who's played the most slot snaps after Reed. So while if I was LaFleur, I would say like, well, we got to get Golden more snaps. If there's snaps up for grabs that Golden might not have logged otherwise, then Golden should get those snaps if at all possible. But it seems like it's in LaFleur's inclination to give that to Wicks more so, and I'm not really interested.
Yeah, I think for me, like in leagues where I have Golden, I'm probably holding off until after this week. I know it's like a soft matchup, and the Packers have like a good implied team total. Should be putting up some points here against the Browns, but like, I think I need to see like a more convincing like route participation and snap count.
Browns corners are tough.
Yes, they are.
Ward is probably one of the corners who best matches up to Golden. So when you throw in the liability of Golden playing as few as like 25 snaps, I mean, I'm not cutting the guy in fantasy because hopefully LaFleur just gets over it because they should give Golden more snaps, but it would take a slight change in policy from LaFleur.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a really interesting week to pay or to kind of like take the microscope to the Packers receiver rotation now that Reed is officially going to be out for a little while. They had to kind of figure things out on the fly last week when he left that game early on with that collarbone injury. Our guy Maddie wants to know a little quarterback streaming action here. Obviously, Russell Wilson is off to a crazy start, at least relative to expectations. That game in Dallas in particular was bananas, but you're not going to get that all the time. Jake Browning, an option, Marcus Mariota, or Mac Jones. I think in terms of long-term, like this guy is going to be the starter. Am I nuts for thinking that Jake Browning probably has like the most projected starts ahead of him?
No, I think that's pretty at least conventional, if not clear, because it's like Russell Wilson had a huge game against the Cowboys. Good for him, but the Cowboys defense is pretty busted, and Browning has to play for however long it is that Burrow's out. So
I think he's playing the whole season.
Against the Vikings, I'm not exactly thrilled for Browning, but when he gets easier, and not next week either against Denver, that's also bad. But also Lambeau in week 6. So it's a brutal stretch that Browning has, but I think it's just sort of hard to fail in that offense as long as Chase and Higgins are on the field. So I guess that's the next dam that might break. And if so, then Browning's really in trouble. But especially after week 6, I think Browning can at least get you some kind of garbage, empty calorie production where he's more or less just carried by the players around him. This week, though, I think I'm actually I picked him up. I think I'm starting Mac Jones on my NFFC team that had Burrow.
Yeah, I think Mac Jones he's shown to be a great backup. I guess you don't want to go into the year as with him as your starter, as the Patriots know, but he seems to kind of come alive a little bit. He might have some sort of a redemption arc coming, a la Sam Darnold or something in the future here. But for now, Brock Purdy, he's out. Although it looks like the injury for Purdy is going to be a little bit shorter term, possibly than was initially reported this time around a week ago, where it's like, oh, he might miss 5 games. It might be a little bit shorter than that. However, Jones in the very short term, I think would be the guy. So I think if you can tell me that you're able to play this quarterback roulette for a couple of weeks here and go with Mac Jones this week and then scoop Browning in a couple weeks, that's the way I would go about it. And I think you also kind of bring up this interesting point where if Browning stinks the next couple of weeks, he's gonna be available once the schedule softens back up.
Yeah, I thought about picking up Browning and said NFFC team, and it was basically the schedule that made me just say like, to hell with it. I'll just start Mac Jones this week and cry on Monday when I have to figure out what to do next, and we'll take it from there.
And then in my NFFC, the biggest pickup this week was Daniel Jones was still out there, and someone dropped a nice little 70% of their fab bag on one Daniel Jones. We've got one more question here before we keep rocking to the next game. We got to pick 2 of these guys as potential. I'm guessing like you're starting 2 flexes here. Jordan Mason, Jalen Warren, DJ Moore, or Devontae Smith. I think I'm starting the running backs. Jordan Mason, especially with Aaron Jones being out and going up against the Bengals, that feels like he's fringe like top 15 running back this week, period, not just flex consideration.
Yeah.
Jalen Warren coming off the nice game. The Patriots defense looks kind of shaky so far. So I think that
it's tough. The tough one is DJ Moore because the upside temptation against that Dallas defense is pretty enormous. But I think I agree. I think like the running backs, it would be a mistake to think that either of these running backs lack upside, and in Moore's case, it's only the upside that you're getting. There's not much floor reassurance. Whereas with Jordan Mason and Jalen Warren, it's like if either of their teams log so many as 40 snaps, then the running backs have to be pushing like like a dozen carries or something like that.
There we have it. So I feel, that DJ Moore detail is tempting, but is that That game is in Chicago, correct?
It is, and it's like the thing. Mason could get 25 carries. Jaylen Warren could get 18 carries and 5 catches. So
Yeah.
it's just it would be kind of a mistake to think that either of them lacked for upside, even though Moore has plenty. And Moore is a justifiable pick. I guess I'm too running back headed. I'm gonna just probably stick with running backs when all else is vaguely equal.
Yeah, I think just your opportunity projection is so much higher with those two guys. And DJ Moore obviously has crazy upside, but I think thus far this season we've kind of seen where Rome is sort of the wide receiver one, at least so far. I don't know if that holds over the course of
Makes
17
sense.
games or
Rome's
not.
really good.
Yeah,
DJ Moore will have his games too, but it's like, man, Jordan Mason and Jaylen Warren have their offenses pretty much to themselves now.
that's what I'm thinking as well. So, and particularly in Mason's case, I liked Mason so much during best ball season, and yet I ended up kind of light, relatively speaking, on him, and I'm kicking myself for that because that looks like he's going to be a part of a lot of teams that end up advancing in best ball tournaments. Moving on, we've got the Texans and the Jaguars. How about that? We've got the Jaguars 1.5-point favorites at home. I think I'm going to ask you the question that's on a lot of people's minds, especially after Monday. What's wrong with the Texans?
What's wrong with both of these teams? Yeah, one thing that disturbs me about the Texans, even though I definitely like DeMeco Ryans in general, and I think at the very least he's a elite defensive coordinator, but as a head coach, I just can't get over when teams give precious snaps, usage from scrimmage and in real important games, moments of significant leverage in these important games. You're giving snaps to Daria Gumbawale and Justin Watson when you have, at the very least, at least you spent a 4th-round pick on Woody Marks, right? Daria Gumbawale is ostensibly the exact same thing as Woody Marks, but just less talented. And you're giving, 15, 20 snaps to Gumbawale. You have Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, respectively, one of the best boundary and slot prospects in this draft, or just recent memory for the most part. And you're giving snaps to Justin Watson. So that's not getting it, in my opinion. That's not prioritizing the right things. And I can't at that point reassure myself that the line stops anywhere in particular with DeMeco Ryans. Then it's like, what else is he getting wrong? If something's so obvious he can get wrong, and apparently with no awareness at all that he's screwing this up. I don't know. Maybe some guys are just meant to be coordinators more than coaches, or maybe DeMeco Ryans is just kind of lacking insight on managing an offense to the point that he needs an elite offensive coordinator to keep his teams upright the way they should be. I don't really know, but you throw in an offensive line that's at best still trying to work its way together. I still like Ursery. I also still like Blake Fisher, even though he's had his struggles. What I don't like is Cam Robinson and the centers. Like, what was that? The Patriots cut Jake Andrews. The Patriots cut Jake Andrews. Their offensive line might have been the worst last year. And then the Texans go and sign him as a starter. It's like, this is just, these are things that you should expect to go poorly. And now that they are, it's kind of like, well, what exactly did the Texans think was going to happen? I don't know. Other than their defense, I'm not counting on anything with the Texans at this point. Their defense should be very good, but with the offense so bad as we've seen, it hasn't really meant a lot in 2 weeks. And so we have kind of just like a failure Olympics between them and the Jaguars, who I don't even know what, like, I think Trevor Lawrence clearly was not perfect last week, but I remember in week 1, there was a couple plays that I saw meme makers posting about on Twitter, saying like, look at Trevor Lawrence totally biffing this. He missed so bad. And it's like, you watch the route. It's like, no, Brian Thomas didn't do this route right, And so Trevor missed a couple times too, but it's like, it's hard to get in a rhythm with a receiver who won't go the same place each time, or wherever he's supposed to go in general each time. So, like the rhythm of a passing game, of a quarterback's work, of quarterback's tasks in the NFL is very delicate and requires precision. It requires, a really high standard of reliability. And so Brian Thomas being kind of just question mark on his route placement is going to make the whole thing screwed up. And I think that's particularly clear given that we look at Well, Parker Washington's had no trouble producing. De'Ami Brown's had no trouble producing. If Trevor Lawrence is the problem, even if you don't think Trevor Lawrence is great, if he is the problem, why wouldn't the problem apply to the least talented receivers of that group? It should not be that Parker Washington is just raking with Lawrence and Brian Thomas cannot. I think I'm hopeful because I'm hopeful that Brian Thomas gets it together because I certainly have enough best ball teams with him. But to me, he's been garbage through 2 weeks, and especially last week. And that one play that a really bad Irish meme maker was saying was Trevor Lawrence throwing a hospital ball. No, it wasn't. You go look, especially from the vertical view of it. Like Brian Thomas had plenty of space to catch that ball. That's a catch Puka Nacua makes 6 times a week. And you're trying to say like that's a hospital ball that no receiver can get. It's not true.
I think hospital balls jump the shark. Like anytime a receiver gets hit, it's like, oh, it's a hospital ball.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny too that the example specifically cited of quarterbacks that don't throw hospital balls, they named Peyton Manning. You know who Austin Collie is? Have you heard the name?
I don't know if Austin Collie knows who Austin Collie is.
Yeah, it's because So there's just nonsense analysis out there, and I'm not saying that is like cope because I hyped Trevor Lawrence. I hyped Brian Thomas. I took him in the first round a bunch of times. That's where I would be incentivized to cope. And you notice I'm not. I'm saying like actually it's just Thomas is just totally blowing it, and I hope he stops because he's obviously got a lot of talent. One thing I will say in Thomas's defense, Liam Cohen's been using him too much in the slot. They shouldn't use him there, especially when you traded like 14 draft picks to make Travis Hunter just a slot receiver. Like, how are you in that case also using Brian Thomas in the slot? Parker Washington's better in the slot. De'Ami Brown's probably better in the slot than Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas doesn't want to run into the teeth of the defense. Fair enough.
Obviously.
Put him on the boundary. He doesn't need to go into the teeth of the defense. Put him where he's actually good and where he wants to play. That would probably help. But against this defense, I don't know. Like, Thomas can definitely roast Lassiter. He can definitely outrun Stingley, but those guys are going to be getting in his face. They're going to test his toughness, and if he's not prepared to kind of man up, then it might just be like the book's out on him.
Yeah, I think that was like one of the bigger sort of like red flags coming out of week 2. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen anything like that from a receiver. So interested to see if he'll be able to bounce back this week. And then beyond that, any other kind of lingering Jaguars observations at post Tank Bigsby trade, when it comes to this backfield?
Yeah, it's interesting that they're totally foregoing a power element. You're seeing a lot of teams do this. I think it's a bad idea as far as fads go. But Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin are very good on the play designs that suit them, which is to say not power designs. You give either one of them space, and as in last week's example, like they both can do damage. So it's good to see Tutin getting going. I didn't want, even as like an ETN truther, I didn't want ETN getting 20 plus carries a game. I want him getting more so like 14, 15 carries, 3-4 catches. That's better suited to his frame and the way that he kind of runs. But yeah, I'm not sure the Jaguars can count on a whole lot other than like if even the run game I'm concerned for if they can't create space. And against a defense like that's certainly one example of where I start to worry. Like maybe you need more brute power than you have, and maybe the space that you're otherwise so good at running through won't be there in this game. So I'm concerned for the Jaguars offense, but if there is a crease, yeah, those running backs can do a lot of damage. It's just the Texans tend to prioritize run defense. And I mean, you saw how do you say it?
Henry To'o.
It's like these guys are headhunters. Like it's not really, they don't even really hide it. So it's gonna hurt if you run against them.
Yeah, I remember To'o from Alabama, and I don't remember him fondly. Moving on, we've got the Bengals and the Vikings, a battle of the backups, as it were. We've got. Aren't we excited to see Carson Wentz again, friends?
One backup and one new starter, John. Sorry to be. I'm saying this is Carson Wentz's team.
Oh, okay, but it's not one backup after another.
No, JJ McCarthy is the backup, but I think I kind of mean that. I don't know. I might mean it.
All right. So digging into this one, I'm gonna I'm going to take a gander at how much the line is bounced around. But currently speaking, this one is in Minnesota. Vikings getting the kind of boilerplate 2.5 point favorite spread in this one. So your initial reads on how these offenses are going to look, at least for this week, with everything that's going on.
I'm pretty concerned for the Bengals, not to the point that I would consider benching, Chase or Higgins, but definitely have to probably scale back their projections because Browning, as much as I think Jake Browning could be more or less okay as a bridge quarterback to whenever Burrow's healthy again, he's still a backup for a lot of good reasons. Browning is kind of negative tools. He pretty much knows how to play quarterback well, and when his tools are not a liability, as we saw at Washington, he can play really well. But there's just so many times where a guy like Browning and his pop gun arm, and you have the pop gun arm, and you're short, and you can't really run that much, and you just sort of play the game on a higher difficulty level than a guy who's supposed to be starting. So going against the Minnesota defense, going on the road to face it, I'm not that psyched for the Bengals here. But just the same, the Vikings offense has just questions to answer. They have not really they get no benefit of the doubt, even though I happen to think that Carson Wentz can't possibly be as bad as JJ McCarthy is right now. JJ McCarthy has been under a lot of pressure, and it's, I guess, a lot of the answers to the questions we're asking might come down to, like, is JJ McCarthy getting blocking that just is that bad as it looks, or is JJ McCarthy screwing up his protection calls at the line, and like guys basically aren't being directed to where they're supposed to go? Because you don't see quarterbacks get pressured like McCarthy has in the first 2 weeks. Like, you just don't see it in the NFL. It looks like a bad high school offense trying to go against, like, the juggernaut recruiting and whatever team of the area that just goes 80-0 on lesser teams like them. So maybe it really was just so bad, and maybe it was just because Darisaw was out that it was so bad, and maybe it wasn't McCarthy's fault. I don't know. I have trouble believing that just Darisaw's absence could cause that much of a problem in the offense. So I have to believe McCarthy's at least a little bit. Either way, as a passer, making line calls, whatever it's been, McCarthy's done a terrible job. So Carson Wentz can be bad and still be better than what McCarthy has done, especially since, to be fair, Darisaw is back. So hopefully that matters. But the reason I picked the Vikings, even though I'm not exactly thrilled for their offense, I think the Vikings defense is definitely better than the Bengals defense, and I think the Vikings are better suited to a power run game, which I think in these games you need. It's like if your passing game kind of needs to hibernate for whatever reason, like if you can't spread out the field and make the defense spread itself thin in the front seven to create some running room, then you better be able to flatten people. And having a running back like Mason is generally better for that than a running back like Chase Brown.
Yeah, I think so too. So I really like Mason. I think if anyone's dangling him out in your leagues, like I think that even if Jones is out for just the 4 weeks or whatever, the 4-week pop that Mason could get you, I think is substantial. And I think if he does as well as I'm expecting him to, like, I don't think that he gives back a ton of like the early down like rushing work either to Jones necessarily. So like his projection moving forward. You were mentioning internet clips being kind of misconstrued with the Trevor Lawrence stuff earlier. People are also saying that TJ Hawkinson is cooked. What's the deal there? Is that
well, he might be cooked in fantasy, but
that's not good.
just...
I need to not hear that.
Well, it's almost always the case that if a quarterback is throwing for 140 yards a game, then pretty much every pass catching player on that offense is cooked. So it's McCarthy that's the problem. We know Hawkinson is really productive as a receiver when there's any vague opportunity there, and he's put up big numbers with less than great quarterbacks throughout his career. It's never been as if like Hawkinson was some merchant of any kind to some great quarterback or another. He's fine. He can take a 5-yarder and add 15 yards after the catch. That's all Hawkinson needs, and it's not even that. Like McCarthy can't even do that much through 2 weeks. And so there's your explanation. I think Carson Wentz will get Hawkinson going in this game, honestly.
Yeah, I feel better about my Vikings pass catchers with McCarthy out. That's not just with McCarthy out, but with Wentz in, which I think paints a really bleak picture of
what is going on.
Boy, that tough. I think the community at large was maybe a little bit presumptuous at how good McCarthy would be able to run this offense, and how much Kevin O'Connell would be able to turn the chicken into chicken salad with McCarthy there. Right. I think he clearly needs some more seasoning. I'm not totally giving up on him, but I mean, for fantasy purposes for this year, it one good quarter out of
they got to bench him. Bad. Like it's like maybe he'll be fine later. And it's like, this is the first time McCarthy has ever faced anything resembling stress on a football field. Like it was all T-ball at Michigan, and it's like the gulf between the T-ball and what you're seeing in the NFL. Sometimes it can be worked through with experience if he has enough talent, but in the meantime, like, we had no data on the space in between, and now I think we've seen that McCarthy's he's got a lot to work through.
I always go back to when we were discussing that particular draft class and looking at McCarthy, and you were just like, how many times did he have to throw it 30 times in college, period? And like, we found like 3 games maybe where he had to do that. It's just like there are so few instances where he was actually asked to do something at Michigan that you really did kind of have to squint to convince yourself. A lot of people did squint and convince themselves, but at this particular juncture, it looks like a longer learning curve than anticipated is in the offing for McCarthy. And then lastly, I just kind of want to get your temperature check on Chase Brown in light of the Burrow injury, because this offensive environment obviously going to look a little bit different. Do the Bengals go to the run a little bit more? We do feel like one of the big cases for Chase Brown was having that proverbial monopoly on this backfield as far as the snaps and touches were concerned. So the efficiency has been pretty not great so far for him, and that's with, a serious passing threat like Burrow back there, like scaring defenses and having lighter boxes to go against. So there's like this weird tension, I feel like, with Brown, where he might be more important to this offense, but at the same time, like, the environment around him makes the efficiency a little bit harder to find.
Yeah, and Chase Brown was already efficiency challenged as it was, so I might be selling him a little short, which I don't even really mean to do. I still think Chase Brown's a solid starter. I just think the narrative around him got a little aggressive when you saw people taking him over like Jonathan Taylor in the second round of drafts this year. And the reason I didn't like that idea wasn't because like Brown is bad, or that I denied that Brown could catch 60 passes and get 250 carries in a really good offense. It wasn't that. It's that he's just not that talented compared to some of these other guys, and especially someone like Taylor. So talent becomes a lot more important the more your margins get pressed and the more you're exposed as a player. And when you have Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase all on the field, there's not that much exposure for Brown because defenses are so spread thin dealing with the other things that he was volume driven even when things were the cushiest they could have been. Now it's not so easy to play. I think we've seen that his comparative lack of talent has mattered quite a bit to this point and might matter again in this game. I will say, I think Brown will have a better game than the first 2 weeks, if only because 90 yards in 2 weeks is such a low bar. I think he could kind of have a mediocre game and get at least to something like 60 in this one. Chase Brown's pretty fast. He's going to get a 20-yard carry eventually. So it's this game might be where it happens. I'm just concerned that the cold stretches in between might be pretty brutal like they've been in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that as well. Efficiency challenged is an awesome descriptor for a running back, but like you don't even we're not trashing him. It's just like it's part of.
They might be asking him to do too, and it's not that he's being asked to do too much exactly. It's just that the fantasy community, when they expect him to be as good as Jonathan Taylor, when he's 20 pounds lighter and 0.15 seconds slower in the 40, it's like those talent differentials matter when the margins get pressed.
They do. And then, I think a big part of it, again, was just like defenses are going to be peeing down their leg, having to try to stop Joe Burrow 35 times in a given game
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, all right, so there's going to be some lanes opened up for Chase Brown, but that wasn't even the case in week 1 when Burrow played the fully healthy game against the Browns. Before we get on to our next game, friends, we got a message from our pals at Vivid Seats. The NFL is back. Don't just sit on the couch. Lock in your seat this season with the Vivid Seats app, where you'll score the lowest price tickets guaranteed. How do you think I got into the Ravens game last week? Crazy. Shout out Vivid Seats. That's right. Vivid Seats is introducing their new lowest price guarantee, so you know you're getting the best deal all season long. Seriously, try to find a cheaper ticket. Good luck. Every rushing yard, red zone pass, and jaw-dropping play of your favorite team live and in person. And here's the kicker. When you buy with the Vivid Seats app, you rack up rewards and free credits. That's your personal home field advantage. And if that wasn't enough, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 purchase with code ROTOWIRE. That's code ROTOWIRE, ROTOWIRE. So suit up this NFL season and download the Vivid Seats app to get the best deal in the game with the best prices. Terms apply. Also got a message from our friends over at RT Sports. The NFL season is here, and the best place to play DFS Pick'em is RT Sports. Download the brand new RT Sports Pick'em app now. Receive 100% deposit match bonus up to $100 in bonus funds with promo code WIRE100. That's WIRE 100. RT Sports offers unique ways to earn bonus funds, such as every time you share your entry slip on X, you get $5 of bonus funds on RT Sports, or if you sync your bank account, you get bonus funds. Also, RT Sports offers weekly free square options on the app with player lines slashed all the way down to half a yard. Download the RT Sports Pick'em app today and use promo code WIRE100 to get a 100% deposit up to $100 in bonus funds. All right, we're moving right along. We've got the Steelers and the Patriots, this one up in New England. The Steelers, I think kind of the prevailing thing about them through 2 weeks, everyone was pretty excited about the offense coming out of week 1. And everyone thought, yeah, hey, the Jets offense might actually be pretty good too. But then week 2 happens, and the Jets offense doesn't perform as well. Obviously, Justin Fields gets a little bit dinged up, and the Steelers lose at home to the Seahawks. And now the questions are, this is one of those teams where it's like their defense in your mind's eye is always just going to be elite. It's the Steelers, right? But that doesn't really feel like it's the case. And then I think that the same could kind of be said for the Patriots. I mean, I think a Vrabel coach team is always going to kind of get that defensive deference from public perception here. But, the total here is not the lowest on the board by any stretch. We're looking at 44.5 here with the Patriots 1.5 point underdogs at home. Give me your thoughts on this game.
Well, yeah, the Seahawks game was definitely weird, and it was also insane to see how that was another Vegas nose example. I don't know what.
It.
Well, I didn't, because I still picked the Steelers, but
anyway,
I was like, yeah, this pick's wrong, but I'm leaving it in. But yeah, the Steelers run defense at the very least has some work to do. I don't know who all to blame. I thought it was a little odd to see how much playing time they were planning on giving Peyton Wilson. I know that guy's really good in pursuit, but I feel like he can get knocked around quite a bit. Guys like Jack Sawyer are getting a disturbing amount of tackles for this defense, and then the secondary is also not playing well. So maybe there's something about the new pieces needing to fit together. It's like maybe Darius Slay will start playing a little better. Maybe they'll all fit together a little better. But in the meantime, the run defense is a problem, and I'm not sure how much Derek Harmon's eventual return can fix that. I definitely like Derek Harmon a lot. I think he might be a big-time player, but the Steelers defense has more than, one or two problems in the meantime. Caleb Johnson not returning that one kick couldn't have helped anything, and that's like a mistake they won't normally have to deal with. So I don't know. I think the Patriots defense at best is kind of a question mark too. We'll see if Christian Gonzalez is back. It's like, yeah, that's bad news for DK Metcalf, but I'm not convinced Carlton Davis, Alex Austin is really going to cut it at the other two spots. And I'm also not convinced that the Patriots run defense is particularly strong or strong enough to thwart the Steelers. But the Steelers offense, as good as it was against the Jets in week 1, I think we kind of had to, at least in hindsight, should have called it as the exact same problem that the Jets offense had in that game, which is like, well, yeah, if you just need one receiver to have a good game, and if you can, run for the rest or whatever, it's like, it's not as easy for Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball when he really needs to, as opposed to like when he's just kind of in a comfortable spot. And I think we saw last week is like, as soon as you take Rodgers out of his comfort zone, it comes with all the problems you would expect of a 42-year-old quarterback with a deteriorating brain and receiver group with no depth at all. Like you'd kind of think, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense that he would all of a sudden look flustered. But I'm not sure the Patriots can put him in that difficult spot, especially if the Steelers are smartly featuring Jaylen Warren more, which that was pretty funny in week 1, how bad Kenneth Gainwell looked in comparison. And it was just kind of like, what the hell is even going on? What do they do? And then, Warren has kind of like a freak game last week. And now all of a sudden, even Aaron Rodgers is like, oh yeah, I guess we got to play Jaylen more. So yeah, at least they're at that point, even though it was always the whole time is like, clearly this is your best running back. What are you doing?
Yeah. So that to me, that's a relief as someone who has probably too many Jaylen Warren shares, but feeling okay about it now after last week, feeling okay about it going into this week. Before I ask you about DK Metcalf and what's going on with him and this pass catching group, we do have a super chat from our friend Skeeter.
Thanks, Skeeter.
Yes, much appreciated there, pal. We got to pick one of these 3. We have them all. I know the answer of where we have them ranked, but I want to hear it from you. Would you play Tyreek Hill, Ted McMillan, or Chuba Hubbard this week in your flex spot?
Oh man, that's really tough, especially without knowing for sure what's going on. If AJ Terrell's out, I think I go with McMillan there, even though I'm nauseous about Bryce Young. I just think that McMillan is very good, and the Panthers don't have much to do, and that's why I pick McMillan over Hubbard, because I'm a little worried about some of the weight of Young's failures falling hard on Hubbard, especially if the Falcons score some points, then the Panthers fall behind, maybe don't run as much. But even if they fall behind, McMillan gets fed, and even if they're not behind, they also feed McMillan.
Right. So I think the game script sets up a little bit better for McMillan. I don't think that the Panthers will be able to play park the bus for all 60 minutes in this game, which would obviously include Chuba getting a ton of work. I don't see that necessarily happening. And then Tyreek, I don't know, you're playing the Bills.
Fair enough. If you want to play Tyreek, I can't tell you not to. It's just
we know what the upside
I'm still
looks
thrown
like.
off by the vibes.
Bigly. I am as well. So I'm going with T-Mac as well. I think that's the play. For everyone's edification, we do have Chuba as the top guy, McMillan, and then Tyreek Hill, I think, in that order. So not too far off from what our flex rankings would tell you. Now back to the Steelers quickly. DK Metcalf, the target share about the same as what we've grown to expect for him. But we've known him to be an ADOT guy well north of 10 yards down the field. He's at 5.1 right now. Is this a reflection of Rodgers and what he's able to do arm strength wise, or is this Arthur Smith galaxy braining his way into making DK this like weird short route merchant? I mean, what's going on there? How concerned are we about this?
I'm not that concerned about it. I think some of it might just be that defenses are sitting back a lot, and so they're throwing quick passes to Metcalf to see if they can get the cushion decreased. But both of these, because of Sauce Gardner in week 1 and in week 2, the Seahawks pass rush getting to Rodgers a bit, guy like Woolen being a pretty good size speed mirror to DK Metcalf's. Those were matchups that might not have gone very well for him anyway. Where you really expect Metcalf to do his damage is when he's going against someone who's like 5'10", someone who's 5'10" and runs a 4.55. That's who Metcalf beats really reliably. And you can still kind of contain him by keeping a safety over the top all the time. But at least in theory, the Steelers were content to kind of just run against those looks. And I would have suggested to them that they should maybe, get more ammo in the run game, if so, or at least get a second pass catcher who can maybe give you some options when Metcalf is getting that safety over the top. But if the Patriots don't put the safety over the top in this instance, a guy like Carlton Davis, I don't think can run with Metcalf very far. So it might be another tough matchup in that it's in Foxborough and he gets maybe Christian Gonzalez, but we'll see. I mean, even Christian Gonzalez at 90% is a different question than a fully healthy Christian Gonzalez. And I do think Metcalf is eventually just going to get some desperate heaves where he's just, by being 6'4", 230 and running a 4.33, he kind of just makes an otherwise fluky play, but one that he's, more likely to make than most receivers.
And then are we keeping the faith on Calvin Austin? Obviously tough week for him last week, but he did play almost every snap.
Yeah, I think Rodgers' problems are more the answer to a guy like Austin's problems than Austin failing exactly. So we already saw in week 1 what he can do, and we know that as a wide receiver 2, Austin's a bit overexposed. We know he's better suited to being a wide receiver 3. So he's gonna play like the talent that he actually is, and in some cases like last week, you get subject to further limitations like Rodgers' bad play, but Austin's fine for his part. And if the Steelers don't move something, like they really have no one else to put on the field other than Austin.
Yeah. So I think he'll remain involved in that offense. I don't think it'll always be as good as week 1, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as things were in week 2 either. One of the big marquee matchups of the entire slate, and of course the early window here, is the Rams going to face the Eagles in Philly. The Eagles 3.5-point favorites. The Eagles, of course, coming off the big win out at Arrowhead, whereas the Rams just kind of took care of business against the Titans last week. Again, the Eagles 3.5-point favorites at home.
Yeah, it's a tough one to call. The Eagles offense sure seems like it has some issues to work through in the passing game. Whereas in week 1, I felt like it was kind of fine because they ran for so much that it was like, well, AJ Brown didn't do anything, of course, but they were running like crazy. They didn't need him. Last week they could have used him and Devontae Smith more, and they still couldn't get either one going. So that's kind of concerning. Arrowhead is a slight excuse, but I think those receivers should travel well, and maybe it's a Jalen Hurts problem, and maybe there won't be so many things at once working against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in most games, including this one. But it still feels like one of those situations where something's a little bit off, and I just don't know what it is or what it would take to fix it. So maybe the smart bet is just to say, like, yeah, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, you know who they are. They're not going to stay disappeared forever. They're going to come back, and when they do, it might not really matter what the matchup is. Like even if we say the Rams defense is good, which I think they have some good pieces. I think their front 7, specifically their front 4, 5, whatever you want to call it, is good. But I don't think their corners are good at all, actually. And I think talents like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith should be way too much for those guys. But I guess we'll see. What I do think, though, is that the Rams are dangerous to the Eagles, and especially if the Eagles don't get AJ Brown and Devontae Smith both going in this game, I think the Rams might be able to win it, just because we would know at that point that the only other production that the Eagles could possibly have would be on the ground. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's enough to beat this Rams defense. And I think the Rams can be beaten in the ground game, but it's just tough for a team week after week to be only a rushing team and stay on the good side of the spread,
I think the Rams are my side that I would take in this one. If you are a AJ Brown or Devontae investor, what's your level of concern?
A bunch, but I don't know. Especially AJ Brown, you pretty much just got to start him.
Yeah.
These Rams corners are not very talented. They are only doing a money ball thing at corner with the Rams defense. So like, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith should just dust them. But yeah, I guess I can't exactly guarantee it with how the first 2 weeks have gone.
No, that's the problem. It's just they're not throwing it enough and not throwing it well enough either. So some consternation there. But we do have another super chat from our guy Pierre Luke.
Thank you, Pierre Luke.
I'm not going to butcher your last name, but we have a flex question. We got Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, Tyler Warren, assuming that he's good to go, and Jameson Williams. This is a PPR format. Who would you start? I think to me, it's probably between Warren and Jameson Williams.
I'd probably go with Warren. And you might have heard us earlier where like we might be a little more running back inclined than most people, but for me, the basic trade-off between a running back and a receiver is the running back gives you a higher floor, and maybe the receiver gives you a higher ceiling, but sometimes the floor and the ceiling are good enough on the running back's part to just go that way. And this is one such case for me because I think Jaylen Warren's really going to get
Tyler
a
Warren.
lot of opportunity.
My mistake. It was Tyler Warren.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. My bad. Sorry about Pierre Luke. In this case, sorry, I would actually. So it's JCM and JMO for me, and honestly, I'd probably go with JCM. Sorry to give you a split answer on this one, but I just think that Washington really has no choice but to run the ball more. They were only giving about 10 carries per game to the true running back in the first 2 weeks, in large part because Daniels has been throwing more than last year. But if Mariota's out there, or even if Daniels is playing hurt, I feel like they have to increase that running back one usage more to like 15 carries than 10. So the basic point about the running back dynamic still applies here, just in JCM's case. And the reason I'm scared of Jameson, I just think he's not that physical of a receiver. Going to Baltimore is often not that fun for opposing passing games, and I especially don't have much faith in a guy like Goff going there.
I agree with that, but I do think the Ravens defense seems to be beatable vertically. So like that, there is like the splash play potential, but that's the case with Jameson Williams at any week. So it is a roll of the dice that way because you can't really project him to have a zillion targets or anything like that. So you're banking on the big play with Jameson Williams. So that's tricky. Yeah, I'd say if you need just kind of a guy to give you a solid return there, JCM. If you need upside, but can take on a bit of risk, I think Jameson Williams is how I would go about it. Let's get to our next game. We've got the Jets and the Buccaneers. The Bucs 6.5 point favorites in this one.
Yes, I believe I saw someone mention that Egbuka had not practiced yet. That's if that's the case, that's definitely not great. And it was recently announced too, the Buccaneers are without Cody Mauch, who I think is their right guard, and he's probably pretty good, if not quite good. So we don't know what's going on with Gedeke at right tackle. I'm assuming Wirfs is a limited, I guess, practice. We'll see about him.
I think Egbuka is supposed to practice before the end of the week is the latest.
Okay. Yeah, there's the Cansey injury is a huge loss for them too. So Buccaneers are really living a harsh example right now of like arbitrary regression, because that's just, it doesn't really matter what you do. Sometimes your luck might just collapse for no reason you can control. And they might, I mean, Baker Mayfield, he's tough. He's ready to wile his way through it best as he can. But if you're missing 3 of your 5 starters on the offensive line, and you're missing Chris Godwin, and if Egbuka is only like 80-85%, and if your defense is worse now, like I know Tyrod's playing for the Jets, but no Cansey definitely hurts them. And I don't know, 7 points is a lot. I think I take the Jets to cover, even if it takes kind of just shenanigans for it to happen. But this really might be, if Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson don't get going for the same as any week, if Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson don't get going for the Jets, they have nothing on offense. So this could be a pretty low scoring game aside from like the defense's scoring points.
Yeah, I was going to say the 43.5, 44.5, depending on what you're looking at. I feel like the under is kind of where I'm surprised that it's still posted there. I could see this one, I wouldn't have blinked if the total was opening under 40 with Justin Fields being out for this one. I guess beyond that, would you consider benching someone like Garrett Wilson in a week like this, or do you feel like Okay.
Not unless I was just killed it with late round pick. Like I need at least a Keon Coleman tempting me, and I don't know who are the other receivers that might have been tempting. But even if the Jets only throw 20 passes, there's reason to think Garrett Wilson gets 10 or 12 of those.
Yeah.
It's not good way to. It's the Jets have not built their offense very well, but they just don't have anyone else to throw the ball to. And Wilson, I think, is a challenge for corners like Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum. They're a little heavy footed.
Yeah, and like Tyrod at least is experienced and competent. He's going to go to the guy
Yeah,
that's
and Fields probably is still not a good passer. It's
right.
probably not a big downgrade actually.
Yeah, good point there. Let's get on over to Colts Titans. Colts kind of like the early story of the year so far, pulling off the upset against the Broncos and obviously pasting the Dolphins to start their season. I think back a little bit to last year, and I know it's not a clean one-to-one analog, but remember when the Saints were blowing the doors off everyone in the first 2 weeks of the season, and then they weren't? I mean, they obviously got a ton of injuries that kind of like crushed their season, but what I mean to say here is that there can be 2 week flashes in the pan that go away. We have a long sample of Daniel Jones not being a good quarterback. How much are we buying this?
I'm not buying it a whole lot. The offense that the Colts have run to this point, I'm sure it's better than most of us expected. Particularly in the Denver game, I didn't expect them to play as clean as they did. But you're also seeing, in my opinion, you're seeing the Colts, Shane Steichen, I guess, smartly they're keeping the cover on Jones. They're not exactly they're not trying to go Mike and Martz with them. They're remaining a pretty run heavy offense. They're getting despite the usage for Tyler Warren, they're getting a quality number of snaps for Mo Alley Cox too, who's a blocking specialist, but still it speaks to the cover that they're committed to providing Daniel Jones when a guy like Mo Alley Cox is playing upwards of 30 snaps a game, even after Tyler Warren is on the team, and even after the depth that they have at receiver is factored in. So the Denver game, to be fair, that was a game that could have easily gone wrong for Jones, and he kept it together. Limited exposure or not, he obviously did his part. I guess what I question about the longer term, especially, is like how long can they hide Jones, and what will happen when they do need Daniel Jones to throw 40 passes in an emergency. It's like what's going to happen in that kind of game. Denver's offense has looked kind of busted through 2 weeks too, so I don't think there was that much pressure from the other side to score quickly. And that's basically, that's it. When you need to score quickly and when you can't sort of just hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor, what then? And I'm convinced Daniel Jones will eventually falter, but for fantasy, it doesn't really matter. I do think they're going to stick with it. Would have to get really, really bad with Jones for them to go back to Richardson, in my opinion, because I think they just point blank do not want to go back to Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
So for fantasy, I think you feel good about Jones. And I think you can also say like Jones has been an upgrade over Anthony Richardson, and that guys like Jonathan Taylor have really benefited for that. But this matchup's weird. Don't know. I never know what to think about the Titans defense. They do so many weird things where they kind of do better than you expect them to in some cases, and other times they look flat. I do think that I think that the Titans are going to make this a tougher game than people expect. I think every team is owed like a sleepwalking game, or a game where it's just like, I don't know why we're not the things that were working last week aren't working this week. And I think that the Colts are kind of due for that. Going into Tennessee, like that's a team like you don't really know how they're going to win, especially on offense, but I think you got to expect them to kind of be a little bit of a pain about it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think a lot of people are probably going to be rushing to get their Indianapolis -3.5 tickets in, and I could see the Titans kind of getting this one gross enough, and maybe Indianapolis, their offense, hitting a bit of a snag in this one on the road against a divisional opponent. So I could see the Titans somehow finding a way there. It's like the line is so low that you're like, how could it possibly be that low? Indianapolis has looked amazing so far, but weird things happen. And then the big other free agent pickup in my NFFC league was about 25% of the budget slapped down on one Elik Aomanor. How are you feeling about him? It feels like, it was kind of out there without a whole lot of discussion. I felt like for a lot of draft season in best ball, mostly like a redraft, like obviously like he was going to be out there on waiver wires to start the season. But late on, it's like, okay, we have a Tennessee offense is probably not going to be great, but outside of Calvin Ridley, who's going to be the other starting receiver? It's probably him. I don't think it's going to be Tyler Lockett, at least not over the course of the full season. We're into week 2, and Manor is like clearly having this kind of big role in this offense. So are you buying it?
Up to a point, like there's clear value to be had in a guy like Manor, especially if you sort of needed that wide receiver depth, and now you can maybe get something worthwhile, not have to pay too much fab to get it or whatever. If you drafted him, you're glad to be getting what you are. But this is not exactly a Puka Nacua situation. Puka Nacua's rookie year. Like this is, if it wasn't for the touchdown catch against the Rams, if it wasn't for just kind of like how quiet Lockett has been, I don't think it would look so. It wouldn't look like it was such a great bounty to have 69 yards and a touchdown through 2 games, but it's like the unexpected factor here has people kind of dreaming on like, well, what if this and what if that? And I think as much as Manor is a good prospect, and he should not have fallen as far as he did, by the way, he should not have gone after Shamir DK in the same round to the same team. But I think Manor is, even if he is great, even if he is more or less Puka Nacua, it's like I'm not expecting Cam Ward to be Matthew Stafford, So I think if you only need Manor to be like a wide receiver 4 who doesn't kill you on his down weeks, then he should be fine. But if people are like, this is the king making event right here, it's like I'm a little more skeptical of that, even though I think he's a good prospect.
Okay. All right. So a bit of brake pumping in that particular case. I think that the Titans offense still has a ways to go before it's like, circle of trust by any means. Next up, we've got the Raiders and the Commanders. I think we can say a lot about this Washington offense if it is Marcus Mariota back there instead of Jaden Daniels. So it's a little bit up in the air. I think that it has people, especially in the chat, a little bit concerned, throwing some names out there as should they start this person or Terry McLaurin. It's like, dang, I wish we weren't having this conversation, but we are. And then obviously with the Austin Eckler injury, just like your kind of quick expectations here on this Washington backfield. I know we've mentioned like probably gonna have to run it more, especially with Daniels being less than 100% if he is even playing.
Yeah, I think Mariota will be okay if Washington commits to running more through the first 2 weeks. And I guess even you could say the last month or 6 weeks of even last year, you started to see Washington go away from a ground heavy offense to one that's been throwing a bit more and basically putting more on Jaden Daniels' plate as a passer. So if Cliff Kingsbury needs Marcus Mariota to be a more pass happy quarterback, then I think that could quickly go wrong. But I think we saw last year when Mariota played for Daniels, it's pretty much plug and play as far as like a more stripped down version of the offense. Like you're not going to run backs make the difference, then I think they should be fine. But yeah, if they try to throw it, if they try to make Mariota throw it like 35 times, I think that's obviously asking for a lot of trouble. And I don't know what a fair expectation is as far as Daniels suiting up, knee, no practice. I guess we'll see how it goes today.
FedEx Field.
Yeah, I think this is a game that could go by quickly because I think both of these teams are inclined to run, and in the case of the Raiders, it's they don't want to air it out with Geno, so this game could be a bit low scoring and quick on the clock.
I could see that as well. However, like one way for the clock to keep running is long runs that sustain drives and first downs. We haven't seen that so much from Genty, and I go back to before the draft, and there was so much smoke about the Raiders taking Genty, and it's like, I love Ashton Genty. I don't love him for the Raiders. The Raiders have bigger fish to fry. Thus far, it's not looked good. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, maybe, but it's like I don't think the Chargers have bigger fish to fry than Omarion Hampton, and he's had the exact same struggles, which are also in both cases linked to small samples. In the case of Genty, like Also, they had Alex Kappa playing at right guard for that Oregon center, and I remember seeing him get knocked around. So you don't see many plays with Genty where it's like, he's playing poorly. You see the defense giving a lot of attention to him. He's going to get going eventually, and I think the Raiders' offense is still pretty well built for the long term, or for the long term this season. Like they just need Jackson Powers Johnson to stay on the field, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So hopefully help on the way because, I think it's understandable for people to be a little bit, not stoked after first 2 weeks for Genty, but I think you're right to keep the longer term perspective in mind. You don't draft him to win week one. You draft
Chargers
him
defense especially is tough. I mean, Jamari Caldwell was flattening those idiots.
and there's a bunch of turnovers on the Raiders end, so I think a more normal game is incoming for the Raiders here. Speaking of the Chargers, they are hosting the Broncos. Really excited for this game. I think one of the gems of the afternoon slate. The Chargers 2.5-point favorites at home in this one, shorter week, but not a ton of distance having to be traveled to get back home. The Broncos come in. Defense somehow kind of looked a little bit. I think they were almost like caught off guard last week. And I think the bigger point, which you were talking about when we were talking about Indianapolis, was Broncos offense has not looked good early on. Although a lot of people were pretty excited with the Troy Franklin performance, and I know he was a popular pickup this week.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced by the Broncos, and when you're giving snaps to Tyler Bidet instead of RJ Harvey, it's like a problem with the problem with the DeMeco Ryans thing from earlier. It's like you're wasting snaps. You're not good enough to waste snaps. You're not up by enough points to be wasting these snaps. So I'm picking the Chargers. I know that the Broncos are a dangerous team, but I think the Chargers are basically a more serious one and one that has a more lucid identity.
And then, I mean, like on the Chargers front, I mean, I think a lot of people are just trying to figure out like how real this Quentin Johnston stuff is.
I think he is exactly what you've seen so far, and I think you have to concede that despite his really good first 2 weeks, Johnston has been somewhat fortunate. Like that, the long plays, the touchdown opportunities, they're not always going to be there, and what will always be there is those dropped passes of his. Like there's just a certain point of exposure that Johnston can't go over before he starts dropping passes. And if they put him on the bench for one play because he dropped a pass and Trey Harris is the guy who plays the next snap, I don't want to have to bet that Harris blows it because I don't expect Harris to blow it really. So I think it's kind of Johnston is going to cool off, and I think but he will stay involved as like, I don't know, 17, 18% target share in the offense.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there are instances last year. I think I go back to the Chiefs game on the Sunday night or whatever, where he was looking good in that game. So I mean, that there is talent there. It's just that the hands.
He's kind of a specialist. He's like a situational specialist and not like a wide receiver one or whatever.
No, and I mean, certainly wasn't drafted as such. That was supposed to be Lad McConkey and everything like that. They've been, I guess, offensive philosophy wise, have you been kind of surprised by the way that the Chargers, I think, I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about this stuff, but I think this one's pretty self-explanatory that the Chargers, I think, are leading the league in neutral situation pass rate.
It might be a response to how defenses are approaching them in the huddle and at the line of scrimmage, because there's a pretty clear evidence that the first two defenses have been really crashing hard on the run. And why wouldn't they? I mean, it's Greg Roman, it's friggin' Harbaugh. They're going to run all the time. So you got to crash on the run. They just drafted Hampton 22nd. We got to crash on the run. And I think Herbert's really good and efficient and explosive production through 2 weeks it corroborates that a little bit more, because it's like it hasn't even looked, especially against the Chiefs, it did not look hard for Herbert. So I'm not convinced that that any defense in particular has an easy task against the Chargers. I think the Chargers are quietly probably one of the more dangerous offenses in the league. And Hampton's not going to stay down forever. Hampton has looked fine. I know the there's really bad analysts who are comparing him to players that he just does not resemble at all on the basis of like 4 carries or whatever. It's like there's never been any room. He's moving fast. He's cracking the shoulder pads. There's no room. Eventually there will be room. And then, we'll see kind of more how the Chargers take a full form on offense. But yeah, to this point, Herbert's had to carry them, which is fine because Herbert's a top 4 quarterback. And if they start respecting the passing game more, then the Chargers are prepared to run more too.
Yeah, they're very built to kind of just however you load up, they're going to be able to, execute against you. And that makes the I'm starting to buy the idea of the Chargers.
Super Bowl could happen, especially because, again, they drafted Jamari Caldwell.
Smart. Yeah, no, I think right now I don't have the odds handy, but I like them to win the West right now. And I think if they win Sunday, those odds are going to go.
I think they got the
crazier.
West. I think it gets clear here.
The Chiefs are stinky. We'll get to them soon. Quickly, Saints, Seahawks. Maybe not a ton to see here, but it does feel like possibly is the Seahawks backfield going to be annoying all year?
Yeah, but Charbonnet's injury, I guess, might make things simpler. I'm not sure what the specifics on that. And if Charbonnet misses time, then at least Walker, you have no concern for. But yeah, I'm not expecting the Seahawks to exactly build on last week. It's like if they beat the Steelers, then I just am gonna have to call it luck or some other fluky thing. I don't think the Seahawks are very good, so I kind of like the Saints to cover just because I'm not convinced either of these teams is that good.
No, they are not. I think, last week was just a lot of it was a weird outing uncharacteristic outing from Pittsburgh. We got the Bears and the Cowboys. This total hanging at 50.5. Yowza. One of the highest totals on the slate this week. I mean, I feel like we could do a whole podcast about the Bears offense right now, but succinctly, if you could be so kind, what are we looking at here? Like, why is it off to the rocky start that it is?
I'm not sure. I think the Detroit defense is probably pretty good, not so good that it excuses the way the game went for Caleb Williams. It's kind of a bummer to see some of the same sack rate issues, but in terms of just like empty calorie production, I think this Dallas matchup should be fine.
Yeah.
Caleb's running a little bit. Dallas was a no-show on defense last week. So, Ben Johnson's new scheme was not going to be an immediate, jump start kind of deal. Like, I think we always had reason to believe that the Bears would start slowly on offense. So, particularly with Rome Odunze looking so good, I'm not exactly buying the doom narrative on the Bears offense, because if Odunze is looking this good, we know who DJ Moore is. We can expect Colson Loveland to flex at some point the year. I do wish the Bears could run the ball a little bit better because they've been run dependent through 2 weeks, and DeAndre Swift is not a workhorse. He's not like the grinder you want for that kind of game. So against the Cowboys, again, it probably just doesn't even really matter. But I do kind of I think the Bears are just going to have more bad narrative around them for a while, because even on the road to the Raiders in week 4, it's like that defense is really well coached and is clearly overachieving. So it's just going to kind of be a weird year for the Bears again.
Yep. I'm sure that they will handle that in a completely sane fashion. The Bears fans will. Are you loading up on that game in DFS?
It's hard for me to imagine how it goes wrong for some guys in this game. CeeDee Lamb, especially. George Pickens, I don't know if the Chicago detail suits him, the wind factor, I mean, or just kind of the long ball is not as likely to be in this venue as a dome or something. But CeeDee Lamb, Javonte Williams, maybe Jake Ferguson, maybe Dak Prescott. Don't see how it can go wrong for them. But I don't know if I would be going for like stack lineups here. It might be more like I try to just get the guys that I think have reliable usage in what will hopefully be a favorable defensive matchup. And I guess that I include DJ Moore in that. I know he's had it down 2 weeks. I think you can believe that the answer is yes on both Odunze and Moore in this case, but I would prefer to just kind of have one of the two and not have to go with Caleb, because if Caleb has a good game, it might be to do with running and not throwing to the receivers, and there's just a lot of wonkiness in the meantime.
Yeah, I could see this being bad chalk, and I could also see it going under. I can't get behind like a Bears game, like loving to take the over, even though like the over hit obviously last week.
All Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. Quick question from our guy, Run CMC. He's been holding on to Matthew Golden. And obviously, as someone who also has been holding on to Matthew Golden in some spots, it hurts. You end up missing out possibly on some good waiver wire darlings, Javonte Williams being one of them in his case. Now it sounds like Trevion Henderson is available. So between those two, who you like better rest of season? Who's the better guy to have on your roster?
Henderson for me. I mean, I didn't understand why he was going as high as he was right before the season, but he should not be getting cut either, especially with the prices people paid. He should not be getting cut. So Golden, I assume, is not in your starting lineup anyway. So even though Henderson's not a plug and play, he is definitely a preferable hold and wait and see.
Yeah, like I have a lot of respect for what Ramondre Stevenson can do, but I think over the course of the season, we're going to see why Henderson was taken by the Patriots and why Henderson was, ends up being like I agree with you. Like he shouldn't have been a 3rd round pick the way he ended up. But 5th, 6th round type of return from Henderson, I think is still within the realm of possibilities. Rounding out the afternoon slate, we've got the Cardinals and the 49ers. Niners 2.5 point favorites at home.
Yeah, the Cardinals defense might be pretty good this year, but now they're also pretty beat up. Don't know what the latest was on Max Melton, but their slot defender Garrett Williams is out. So that's a big loss. If Melton might be out there and Will Johnson Melton actually was limited in practice Wednesday. It was Will Johnson, the 2nd round rookie, who did not practice. So Williams is out in the slot. If Johnson is out or limited on the boundary, seems to me like Mac Jones should be able to hold up okay against, like, I guess your biggest concern at that point is like Josh Sweat, which it's not nothing. You got to take him seriously. But if that's the worst thing you have to worry about in the defense you're facing, it's probably an okay setup.
And then, on the 49ers front, looking at how their offense looked last week with no Brock Purdy and obviously no George Kittle either, any sort of initial takeaways from like what maybe we can expect here over the next maybe 2 weeks while Brock Purdy is sidelined as far as like his target distribution and like the run pass split?
Well, 39 pass attempts for Mac Jones is interesting, but I don't think it's in Shanahan's inclination to normally throw the ball quite that much. As a person who has to start Mac Jones this week, I hope that they do. I hope it's a good time to go air raid, in my opinion, Kyle. This is a good time. Maybe Jake Tonjes is good. I'm not. That's one guy I just did not notice at all as a prospect, so I'm totally ignorant on him. But if he must play Kittle's snaps, then there might be a little something there, even though he didn't do that much last week. But I think in Tonjes' case, especially for like a DFS punt, like you can be pretty encouraged with how he played 50 snaps last week.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's at least like the baseline playing time available there, and he got the touchdown in week 1, if I remember correctly. So
and Tonjes is the runner between himself and Farrell. Farrell is clearly the blocker of the two.
So Farrell had the touchdown last week, but Tonjes, I think, could be that interesting punt in DFS this week at your tight end spot. Anything else to add on this game?
Go Mac Jones. Let's go.
We've always been huge Mac Jones guys. Totally.
Yes.
Definitely not just before Tuesday or Wednesday night when the waivers ran. Before we get to the night games, got a message from our pals over at Chalkboard. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to 40 grand on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports, now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get $20 free with no deposit required. Night game, Sunday night game. Chiefs, Giants. Is playing the Giants going to be what cures what ails the Chiefs?
Probably not as much as Chiefs fans hope. I really don't think the Giants are a pushover. Will the Giants lose the game? Probably. Mahomes, even if you don't give him any help, I don't know if I want to bet on Mahomes losing 3 times in a row. It's like,
right.
If he has to throw the ball to himself at some point, I almost see that easier than him losing 3 times in a row. But I do think it's a really tough game for the Chiefs. I think they need their defense to show up. Not because Russell Wilson's 450 yards heralded a new era for the Giants passing game, but you do have to think Neighbors is a pretty much constant factor. We know that Wan'Dale Robinson and Slayton are situationally effective, at least. And Cam Scatterbo, in my opinion, totally changes this offense. I mean, I wasn't exactly a Tracy hater. For me, it's more like Scatterbo, when you watch him, even though he's slow, like I think you pretty much immediately see that there's some kind of unique like springiness to him, and it's the ability to sort of pick up and drop anchor at any moment's notice and just either jump cut or get low and get the shoulder pads cracking from underneath. It's like Scatterbo really is not easy to deal with for a defense, be it like behind the blockers or in a phone booth, one-on-one tackles. He's not that easy to get. So that's something that could really be a game changer for them, I think, because Scatterbo, in my opinion, if his speed doesn't hold him back, there's not really any reason he can't be one of the better running backs in the NFL, especially as a power runner.
Watching Scatterbo, even back to Arizona State, it's like watching his highlights reminds me of when you bowl a strike at a bowling alley and like those crazy animations of like a bowling ball doing wild stuff to pins. That's sort of what Scatterbo, like what he's doing to defenses, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound like we're kind of just like making up qualitative descriptions of the guy, but there's really something to like his method of running is basically that he can brace for very heavy contact from a low anchor point, low center of gravity, or he can jump 4 feet to either the left or the right. And you can't, as a defender, know which one it's going to be, and you have to kind of be prepared for both. And so you might ask yourself, like, well, why do these linebackers keep coming in too high? Why does he keep, popping these guys? Don't they know that he's short? Don't they know that they got to get low to tackle him? It's like, yeah, they're trying. It's like they can't really do it though.
Yeah, I mean, he won the angry runs scepter after week 1, where he like had 1 touch for like negative yards. Like he's just like, he's kind of just like that, he's
even in that. It's kind of funny, man, that week 1 game where he had like 4 touches for 8 yards or whatever. I still was like, oh man, he looked awesome.
Yeah. Music to my ears. Do we need like 1 more week before we feel good about starting him?
No, it's time.
It's time. It's got to be time, everybody. Let us rejoice. Last one. We got the Ravens and the Lions on Monday night. 53.5 is your total over at the DraftKings Sportsbook. In this one, the Lions obviously kind of got the stink of week 1 off of them last week. The Ravens, they scored a lot of points again against the Browns. I don't know if beating the Browns really makes them feel better about how things ended in Buffalo, but it happened. The Ravens have been kind of tricky to figure out for fantasy, and obviously Derrick Henry had the sort of invisible day that I think messed up a lot of people's fantasy weeks, but I don't expect that to continue necessarily, although the Lions do have a good run defense. So this is a tricky one to call as far as like what's going to work on the Baltimore side, but other than, Lamar Jackson and seemingly Zay Flowers. But your thoughts on like the Ravens offense through 2 weeks, printing points, but fantasy maybe a little bit trickier to draw the value from.
Yeah, it's a dangerous matchup for them. It helps, I think, maybe quite a bit that the Ravens are at home. I know Jared Goff had that. Am I remembering correctly? Goff had a good game against them in Baltimore a couple of years ago, or maybe 3 years ago.
It might have been a couple of years ago, because 2 years ago in Baltimore it was a disaster game for for the Lions when it was in the dome.
Well, that's what I
Detroit.
expect more so, like I am never going to relent on Jared Goff being pretty much just a fake quarterback, or at least the poster boy of quarterbacks don't matter. And going to the Baltimore stadium, it tends to press your margins a bit. I right or wrong, maybe wrong, who knows. I believe in the Ravens defense. I think a guy like Nate Wiggins can be one of the best corners in the league. And if Jair Alexander can't get back and be useful, it's like Chidobe Awuzie's seemed pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah, he's looked good.
So I think it's just a tough setting for the Lions offense. And I think you're going from the easiest possible setting last week to a fairly challenging one in this case. And it's like I'm not banking on Jamison Williams having 50 yards per catch 2 weeks in a row, things like that. It's like the Lions need to run better than they have through 2 weeks, or at least they need to run like they did in week 2 as opposed to week 1. And I'm a little concerned that it might be more of like a week 1 kind of rushing output for them. So the Ravens might not need to score that many points to win, but they also kind of need to make sure that that's the case, because the Detroit defense can pose some tough matchups too. And as much as I generally think there's ways to beat the Lions corners, and I think Jack Campbell is just not good at linebacker, Jack Campbell gets a ton of cover because the Lions commit to 2 nose tackle offense. They have 2 2-gap defensive tackles at all times. That's why they spent the first round pick on Tyleik Williams, even though Aleem McNeil on PUP or whatever, he's going to be back someday. But they were like, what? Too long. We need another one. We need DJ Reader and another guy. No questions asked. So that they make that kind of trade-off. They commit to that so they can make it tougher to stop a guy like Derrick Henry up the middle, and to give Jack Campbell cover so he can be free to pursue, which he can do that. Jack Campbell can definitely run. But I do think if you're the Ravens, you have to try to line up some kind of thing where you either get Jack Campbell having to make a quick read, quick decision on Derrick Henry, or you have to try to get Lamar Jackson one-on-one with Campbell on the boundary or something like that. So it might be, if the Lions are committing to stopping on the interior, it puts more pressure on Lamar to make some runs off tackle or something like that. And Brian Branch, not who you want Mark Andrews to try to get open against, so that I'm not expecting Mark Andrews to kick the door in either. So it might be a bit of a grind, and the Ravens have to be careful. Lamar Jackson has to be careful. But I do think as long as Lamar Jackson doesn't turn it over, the Ravens are better prepared to fight that war of attrition. And there's always the fact that it only takes one bad pursuit, one bad run fit with guys like Henry and Jackson as ball carriers to have the field reversed on you.
No, absolutely. So I think you draw up a pretty realistic narrative for this game, or expectation, where defenses could kind of reign supreme here. I mean, it's a big ask to get over 53.5 on a Monday night game. I feel like that's always like the catnip that never really ends up actually hitting. Obviously, the Ravens game against the Bills a couple weeks ago, there's 80 some odd points scored in that one, but I see this one being a bit more of a defensive battle as well. I think the Lions cover. I think the Ravens win by a field goal in a somewhat low scoring defensive battle on Monday night. I think that's going to do it for us here on this edition, the full Week 3 preview for your fantasy football enjoyment. Best of luck to everyone's lineups this week. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Chalkboard, over at RT Sports, and over at Vivid Seats. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.